considered by anyone as a proportionate use of force. These people were protesting peacefully when the brutal police crackdown began. Now the hospital beds are full, patients with shot wounds to their bodies, injuries caused by rubber-coated steel bullets, and others who are beaten with rifle butts.
It's a massacre by all means. People are shot because they are innocent. They haven't done anything. They were just protesting. What is this? We are in 21st century. I mean, we are in a civilized country. We are civilized people. These people were only demonstrating, and at the end of the day, they were shot dead.
The victims here include the medical staff themselves, who'd been treating people in a triage tent set up near Pearl Roundabout. Consultant Dr. Sadiq Al-Ekri says he was severely beaten and left for dead. Did you tell them you were a doctor?
Yeah, but they don't listen. And I was wearing the uniform for the doctors. You know, that one with the crescent. Then they tie me and they attack me while I'm tying. Then I don't know how many people, maybe 10, maybe 20. I don't remember. I'm hearing from everywhere. I was hearing hit by sticks, by legs. I don't know what they. Then they told me, get up or we'll kill you.
Nurses were also beaten.
I went there as volunteer there. What's this? What is this? This is the democracy? This is democracy? I don't know. This is Bahrain? I don't know.
In the hospital mortuary, the bodies of the dead. One man is missing part of his skull. Doctors say he was beaten to death. 2 others died after being peppered with shotgun bullets. Ahmed Botaki comes to pay his respects to his younger brother, Mahmoud, dead at just 22. They mourn, many are angry. But all say something has changed here. These deaths will never be forgiven. AlJazeera, Bahrain.
A difficult time for those burying their dead. Our correspondent is actually at a funeral right now. What's the situation like there?
Well, the crowd is praying here in an area called Sitra, a suburban area. This is where 3 of the people who were killed came from. 3 funerals taking place, the first now underway. There is a large crowd here, hundreds of people. I say a large crowd, but obviously not as large as we saw for previous funeral marches, and I think there are 2 reasons for that. I think number 1 is the security presence. There are a lot of police and army on the streets. They've closed off certain roads and certain areas, making it hard for people to gather in different parts of the island. Travel is quite restricted, and I think the second reason is that many of those who in the past came out, and we saw those huge crowds, not just at the funeral marches, but also at the Pearl Roundabout, thousands upon thousands of people, women, children and men. I think many of them now are afraid. They're frightened, and they don't want to turn up at a protest like this because they're fearful for their lives.
Once the shock has, to a certain extent, settled in, one wonders how angry people are. You know, you say that they're frightened and they don't perhaps want to attend because they're worried about the security forces, but are people still angry at what happened 24 hours ago?
People are extremely angry. People are grief-stricken. But I think people are shocked. People, whenever you speak to people, they say they didn't think this could happen here. They thought that the Bahrain authorities would object to some of the things they were saying, but they didn't think that the crackdown would be as heavy-handed as it was. And we still don't know the exact death toll of what happened because there are still widespread reports of people who are missing. Some of the missing have turned up. They've come back from being treated in a military hospital. Some were arrested, held by the Bahrain army, who've now handed them back to the police, and now they've come back to their homes. But there are others still missing. The exact figure is almost impossible at this stage to ascertain. We're making calls, but it's impossible to find out the exact true missing figure. But one politician I spoke to a short time ago put it at about 70 people.
Of course, Friday is part of the weekend, and Friday Friday prayers normally allows people to understand the sentiment of the community. Are we expecting any significant statements from any of the major religious leaders there today after Friday prayers?
I think we probably will hear statements after Friday prayers, and I think it's possible as the day progresses. I've told you about the difficulties of travelling at the moment because of the road closures. I think there may be bigger crowds after Friday prayers in a matter of hours' time, because I think there are many people who do want to come out and express their anger and their concern about what has happened. But as I say, among many families, there is this sense of fear that probably it's better to stay safe at home today rather than come out, given the injuries and deaths that they've seen.
Well, of course, we'll be following events there in Manama throughout the day. Thanks for joining us. The UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon has urged an end to the violence in the country.
The reports from Bahrain overnight are deeply troubling. Here, as elsewhere, violence should not be used against the peaceful demonstrators and against the journalists. It must stop, and those responsible must be brought to justice. In responding to peaceful protest, authorities have an obligation to respect human rights. There should be no violence from any quarter. I urge all parties to exercise restraint.
Well, foreign ministers from the Gulf Cooperation Council met in Manama late on Thursday to discuss the spiralling political unrest in the country. The emergency session was called as anti-government protests fan out across the region. Bahrain's foreign minister told the meeting the police action was necessary to bring the country back from, and we quote, sectarian abyss. The GCC includes Bahrain, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia and Oman. Youssef Bouandal is a specialist in the comparative politics of the Middle East. He joins me here in Doha. The GCC stating that, or certainly the Bahraini foreign minister stating that they wanted to try and save the country from a political abyss. What's he alluding to?
Obviously, as we all know, Bahrain is divided into two sects, the Shiites and the Sunnis, and the violence that have been taking place over the last few days in Bahrain has a sectarian dimension, and obviously nobody wants to see the pictures we saw early on. And in order to justify these acts of violence committed against the demonstrations, the foreign minister of Bahrain has to give it a religious dimension.
I mean, speaking to our correspondent on the ground, talking about the funerals happening right now, people perhaps very angry, still in shock that they couldn't believe it could happen in Bahrain. It's been a very long time since the United Nations Secretary-General has even commented on a situation in Bahrain.
Well, I think Bahrain is the smallest country in the Arab world and obviously has been relatively stable for a long time, and nobody would associate these atrocities with Bahrain. Obviously, the horrific pictures we saw early on speak volume. People are in shock, like you rightly say. The Secretary General of the UN commented on the situation and urged the government to restrain. But most importantly, I think Friday prayer today will be telling, and the role of the imams